Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about Chiron transiting the 8th house in a natal chart. Now, on average, Chiron will traverse a house for approximately 4 years. However, if your house size is a little bit larger than average, then Chiron will be in there for a little bit of a longer duration. If your house size is a little bit smaller than average, then Chiron will be in there for a little bit of a shorter period. Well, anyway, people, the first thing I'll look at when Chiron transits your natal 8th house, well, this could be a time where you might be experiencing perhaps some emotional wounds, maybe some suffering in connection with 8th house matters. The 8th house does rule sex. I'm not saying when you have this transit you definitely get some kind of sexually transmitted disease or something, but I think as far as some difficulty sexually, it can increase the propensity for this a little bit because the 8th house does govern sex, and Chiron is about wounds, emotional and physical. So I think it's really important in this transit more than a lot of others to really be taking the precautions necessary if you are sexually active. So anyway, there could be despondency, perhaps over an intimate relationship during this time. Yes, I'm going to talk about the dreaded D word because the 8th house does govern death. And perhaps there's some despondency connected with death. You could experience some emotional suffering because of this. It doesn't mean just because you have Chiron transiting your 8th house that automatically means you're going to lose someone, but it does increase the possibility by a little bit anyway. And also, what could happen is it could even be the death maybe of maybe a friend's friend. Maybe you have a friend that talks to you about someone dying, and this could perhaps maybe resurface some kind of old wounds that you suffered dealing with somebody prominent in your life that had passed away at some time in your life previously. So those are some things to look at as far as this transit goes. And the 8th house, of course, is also about others and shared resources, and there could be you might be dealing with some suffering connected with this. There might be maybe something happens where you feel the shared resources are like a 50-50 split, so to speak, and what happens is you wind up paying 90% of the bill, so to speak, on things, and you're really paying 90% of the bills instead of 50%, for example. And also keep in mind, this is the wounded healer, so you could be experiencing some difficulties in connection with taxes, with debts, perhaps with death, maybe even sexual matters, but you could preach to others perhaps and tell them how to do well in these particular areas of their life. You can be you could be somebody that might help somebody in terms of filling out their own tax form, but for some reason you might have difficulty doing so yourself, and you're experiencing this transit. Say at the time that I'm making this video, Chiron is currently transiting Pisces, so it could be that maybe your own tax form, if you're actually doing it now, I know it would be kind of late in the year, but if you are, say in some examples, if you're behind on taxes or something, and maybe your own tax situation could be very convoluted and confusing, but for whatever reason you're able to help somebody else with theirs and see it in a very lucid and clear manner. It could be somebody that may have their own hang-ups sexually. Maybe there's difficulty in finding that intimate partner during this time, but you could be very encouraging to somebody else in terms of that person finding someone and helping them find somebody, an intimate partner in his or her life. Now, the 8th house is also associated with astrology, the occult, and supernatural. So especially if you're somebody that study it, that either an astrologer perhaps as an example, or if you're somebody that is an astrology fanatic, you're a fan of astrology, and you're really studying it extensively, and you're just a loyal student of it, perhaps you might be in a position now with Chiron transiting the 8th house. You might be able to help somebody else, maybe in matter as far as maybe astrologically, as for example, getting to know themselves through their own chart and being able to assist them that way by being cognizant of certain placements in their chart. But for another example, because you might have trouble maybe doing so for yourself and helping yourself in this manner. And I think a lot of times when you have the Chiron transits, whether it's natal or transit actually, the reason, Chiron is the wounded healer. I think what happens is, and I've said this before in some other videos, but if you hadn't heard it yet, a lot of this, I think it's connected with the fact that you could be expending a lot of that energy helping others, and what happens is your own energy in helping yourself in that same area could be dissipated to some degree because you expended so much on that person. And sometimes things could be there's somehow the wounded healer, it's somehow interconnected. And as an example would be if you were to have, say, Chiron transiting say your 2nd house, you might be able to help somebody else out monetarily, but maybe you can't help yourself. But the reason could be inextricably interwound. The two, you helping that person, you having problems yourself, because if you're giving money to somebody, you're depleting your own finances. So that's how I think they're a lot of times they're interconnected. So as far as the wounds that you receive and the help that you're giving others is what I'm saying. So those are some things to look at as far as this transit goes. And another thing too on this is that the 8th house is also associated with psychology. So it could also be a time where you might be able to do something beneficial for others related to psychology, and offering that assistance to somebody, suggesting maybe they need some kind, maybe seeing psychologist, for example, and at the same time, maybe if you're in need of one, those minute instances where one may need one during this transit, you might not be able to do that as much for yourself for whatever reason. So anyway, it's also important to look at the aspects, if any, that are made from this transit to your natal planets in points, as this could impact the transit. Now let's say, for example, that you have, let's say transiting Chiron is making a sextile or trine to your natal Mars. Now this could be auspicious for incorporating healing, helping perhaps with this as far as with this auspicious for incorporating healing and helping and with a lot of energy, with abundance of energy. Now being in the 8th, this could be tied in perhaps to transformation. Now another example could be, let's say that transiting Chiron is making a square in conjunct or opposition to your natal Jupiter. Well, this could indicate perhaps some healing and helping that you're trying to do for somebody may conflict with perhaps long distance travel plans and even things connected with higher education. And being in the 8th, this could be some maybe suffering connected with perhaps a sexual partner or something that's associated with shared and others' resources. Well, anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for Chiron transiting the 8th house in a natal chart. And stay tuned next time where I'll be talking about Chiron transiting the 9th house in a natal chart. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.